Untitled. This is Chad Barron. You're listening to My Alien Life.
So those kind of speeds exist in our galaxy, and this object came from outside of our solar system. Having a large relative velocity, remember objects in our solar in the galaxy are moving with relative velocities on average of between 200 and 300 kilometers per second, which is much, much faster than any object in our solar system. So any random object that wasn't part of our solar system happened to be traveling in the direction of our solar system, it could easily traverse our solar system with a speed that's incredibly large.
It had been tested on lab mice, and it didn't kill them, and so I wasn't really that leery about it.
I can see there's a fear on his face. He took off, we took off, so something was wrong there, man. Something was wrong there, man. They cut into something that they didn't know. They didn't know what was wrong there, man. And there was some problems.
My Alien Life is recorded high atop the Northern Rocky Mountains and is heard all over the world, and you can listen everywhere fine podcasts are found. My website is www.myalienlifepodcast.com. There you'll find links to every episode, stories, photos, the My Alien Life Legends page, and much more. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and consider becoming a patron while you're checking out all the content. I'm your host, Cameron Logan. This is My Alien Life, and the podcast starts right now.
My Alien Life Podcast.
Three, two, 1, 0, and liftoff.
Yeah, I was on 2 Canadian shows last week, and now I'm lucky enough to host a show with another Canadian. Hi, in the UK, Ian Gibbs. Thanks for joining me, and welcome. You're also from the UK?
I was originally born in the UK. Yeah. Came here when I was about 4.5.
Right. How do you like it so far?
I'm gonna stick around, I think. You know, it's funny though. I had to become a citizen. My parents, God bless them, decided not to become citizens until after my brother and I were 18. So
Really?
I had to go through the whole citizenship process. Yeah, it was pretty eye-opening.
So, how long is that process? And
About a year.
What'd you have to know?
Well, you have to. I mean, I had to have landed immigrant status, which of course I did.
Right.
And then I had to go and do a test, and that was all on government structure and Canadian history. And I actually got one question wrong. I'm really embarrassed, but I can never remember lieutenant governor and governor general. I never can keep those straight in my head. And the question was about who is the lieutenant governor, and I'm like, D? I don't know. And then you go and talk to a judge to show you are who you are, and you can speak English fluently or French fluently. And then you go to a ceremony and do the swearing in, and that was it. So yeah, it took about a year. Yeah.
I grew up right on the Canadian border, and we had nothing but Canadian TV. And we had radio. I actually worked at a Montana radio station, but listened to Lethbridge and Calgary on the radio. Which was super. I mean, especially, they had even back then, I'm an old guy, but back then they had sports channels back then, and covered hockey, Canadian.
Oh, big time.
And I love Canada, love Calgary, I love the whole trip up there. Right now I'm 5 hours away from Calgary. Yeah.
Whereabouts are you in Montana?
I'm in the northwest.
Okay. We used to go to Kalispell quite a bit.
Where I'm at. That's where.
Oh, okay, yeah. Because I think that was the biggest.
Yes, we remember when you came down.
Yeah, they still speak of it.
I can't find any black jeans in TJ Maxx, and but there's now that the border's open, I mean we're inundated, so it's nice to see that again. actually.
Yeah, we're pretty happy because where we are in Victoria, of course, we're on Vancouver Island, so you have to take a ferry to go anywhere. But there is a direct ferry over to the States, and that's the nicest way to go because there's no border lineup. You just get off the boat with the other 40 people, and boom, you're in.
So where's the landing? Where do you?
In Port Angeles.
Oh yeah.
That's for the car one, and then the other car one leaves from Sydney, and it comes in at it goes through the Gulf Islands and ends up closer to Seattle. Yeah,
right.
But or you just take the regular BC ferry over and get off in Vancouver and then drive across the border. So
anywhere from where you are south, right along the coast, all the way down to even Portland and beyond. But it's amazing. It's just some of my favorite parts of the world.
Stunningly beautiful. Yeah, we took a 2.5 week car tour, and we went down Washington, Oregon, California, and then we went across to Nevada, and then we went through Utah, touched into Colorado, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, and then back over to Washington State, all in a 2-seater sports car with a trunk the size of a cooler. That was not good thinking, but it was amazing. It was a great trip, really good trip.
Yeah, there's so much to see there, and I love the northwest portion of Washington and across up there. It's just wow. And then I said south, but you can go as far north as you want. It's just you never stop being amazed. And I have
it's the coast, right? It's stunning.
Yeah. But I grew up on Canadian TV. Lots of hockey, lots of wrestling.
It's Stampede Wrestling.
Yeah,
Calgary.
Stampede Wrestling. And, we would often see the Hearts, make some Heart sightings there because we were right on I-15.
That's right.
And they would be. I mean, this has been a long time ago, but. Stories of the local bars there, our town of 100 people. But
one of the Hart brothers was also a substitute teacher.
I heard that.
Yes, and he subbed for me in grade 9 when I was in grade 9.
Yeah,
I remember him coming in and everyone going like, "Oh my god!"
Right. So the last Stanley Cup game I was at in like 2004. Somebody was telling me it was Stu Hart was a substitute teacher.
Right. Yeah. One of them. I can't honestly remember who now. But
yeah, that's funny. I haven't heard that too many. I've heard it maybe 3 times now.
And
I can't even imagine.
It's pretty surreal. Yeah.
Because they were icons up there.
They were.
And if anybody doesn't know who we're talking about the Hart family. And there was I guess the patriarch maybe was Stu Hart. I don't know.
They're like a dynasty, those people. There's a legacy there.
They have a wrestling ring in their basement in this big, huge house in Calgary, and there's and not only did the family wrestle, but the girls married wrestlers, the guys married
naturally
girls who were daughters of wrestlers, and it was quite a story. And there's a documentary on that just came out maybe a year ago. About the Hearts. Yeah, it's really good. Actually, it's a series, and I think it's on Netflix, and it's it's really deep. I mean, it's pretty disturbing at times too, but anyway, like I said, I'm talking to Ian Gibbs. Ian, just take a couple of minutes because there's a lot of people who in the United States in my area that don't know who you are, but my listeners may not, and just take 2 minutes and just tell everybody who you are, if you would, please.
Yeah, well, I have I've been doing podcasts now for about 5 years. The one my partner and I do is called Ghosts and Bears, and we say we're the only podcast that tells you the actual ghost story with the actual history and the actual place. That's our thing. So we'll do the history portion, and then we go to wherever the ghost story happened and record it. That all came about because of doing ghost walks. So I have been leading ghost walks downtown for 7 or 8 years now. I work for a company. And we have 7 different routes that we take people on, mostly during the summer, for an hour-long ghost walk, all different stories. And I really enjoyed doing that. And then my first Halloween doing that, I had a woman ask me a bunch of questions, which is pretty normal. And then she said, "Can you write like you speak?" And I said, "I think so." And she said, "Good, I want a book." And she gave me her card, and it said Touchwood Publishing. And I'm like, is this a scam? Like, am I going to have to pay to get this book published?
It still might be. Just keep your
yeah. But she was serious, and about 3 months later, I signed the contract and wrote Victoria's Most Haunted, and that did really well. So when I went back and said, "Hey, how about Vancouver?" and she's like, "Of course." So Vancouver's Most Haunted came out, and now I'm in the process of putting together Calgary's Most Haunted, which I have to have into the publisher by the end of October, and it will come out in October 2023.
This is a bad joke, but I was in Calgary a few years ago, and I was with a friend of mine who was from New Jersey, and of course he had never been to Canada, and we were at like Joey Tomatoes in Calgary, and waitress came up, and he starts talking. He's a big talker, and starts talking with her and asks her what if this was a full-time gig. She said no, she's a college student. He said, "Oh, really? What are you studying?" And she said Canadian history. And he started laughing, and to me, I was offended because she was offended because he knew nothing about Canada, right. And of course, you have as much history as we do here. So I think that time why the White House is white. You know that one, right? Yes.
How the Canadians came down and burned it.
So, I guess what I want to know, you're an author and you've written books about Vancouver and Victoria. Every big city in North America, it seems, has a ghost book. So historically, why are yours different? And talk a little bit about the history of that area.
Yeah, for me, the reason they're different is because I've read a lot of ghost books, of course, being a fan of the genre. And what I noticed was they kind of fell into two camps. The ghost books are either written by people who were like very reporter style, kind of this person alleges and so-and-so claims, or they're written by people who are just like semi-crazy. Like my cat told me that this ghost was in the house for 8 years. And I thought there's got to be a middle ground, because even as a little kid, I would have experiences. I would experience things. I would sense things. And unfortunately for my little kid self, I grew up in a house that was deeply conservatively religious. And so I was constantly being told, "You're making it up. That's not real. That's the devil." That's, basically shutting it down. And ironically, it wasn't until I went to Bible school that I met other people who had the same sorts of senses and could pick up on different kind of energy. So when I wanted to write a book and make it my own, what I did was a bit of a hybrid approach. I would report on the stories. I would dive into the history because I love history. But I would also go to the place myself and see what I could sense and see what I could pick up. And did I get any kind of vibrations? I would take people with me who are really, really good at that kind of thing and say, well, what are you picking up here? What are you sensing here? And combined all that into a book that it's going to be readable even if you don't believe in ghosts. And it's also just kind of fun because you got this great social history behind it as well, but also lending it my own voice or my own sense of it as well. And that's been great because people have really responded to that with their own stories. I think when you kind of open yourself up like that and you're like, no, I'm going to respect whatever you say, right? Because whatever someone's experiences is, that's their experience. You can't judge that. That's their experience. So I'm always saying, hey, send in on the podcast, send us your ghost stories. We'll love to share them. And people have really been doing that. So that's what makes my book a little bit different. I'm kind of a hybrid approach. I'm not strictly reporter. I'm not strictly, psychic person at all. I kind of bring the two together. Just sort of, it's sort of a place where, this is where your experience is safe, right? And I do have not just places in a city where you're going to know where they are. A few of them have come from people who read the first book. And so there's like a home on Pacific Avenue with a ghost story. And she sat down, and she sat down and told me the story. And I said, wow, like, can I put this in the book? Yeah, I mean, change my name because it's my grandparents' house, blah, blah, blah. But no problem. But that's amazing. And the fact that it happened in Vancouver was great. So it's a bit more of a mix. It's not just kind of the historically famous places. It's also just going to be places in Vancouver that are haunted, whether you know them or not. So it's been a lot of fun.
So Vancouver itself, I think of Vancouver, actually, and I think of Victoria. I think of them as ultra modern cities, nothing, huge, big, beautiful windows with a lot of glass, buildings with a lot of glass, rather. But it's not true, though. I mean, there's some historical, deep aspects of that area, and what brought people out there in the first place?
What brought people out was the fact that they went as far as they could go. They wanted to see how far they could go. Lumber, huge. Yeah. The steamships were actually how people got up and down the coast originally, and even up and down the rivers. And that's what fueled the gold rush in 1858. Victoria very quickly became the hub. We were a fur trading fort back in the 1800s, and Vancouver was a couple of shacks by a muddy river. Like, there was nothing going on. We were a fur trading fort, and then in 1858, boom, gold rush. And Victoria went from 300 people in this little fur trading fort in 3 months to 30,000 people. Wow. Like, it was massive. And if you know anything about gold rush history, it's not the priests and nuns who are coming out to minister to the needs of the prospectors. So our first brick buildings housed our first brothels and saloons and casinos, and we had a full-on red light district before we had anything else, really. And it was pretty lawless. It was pretty out of control. So that definitely fueled a building boom, but it also fueled a lot of people just kind of disappearing. They'd show up and they were there with their money to buy supplies for the trip, and if they opened their mouth and said, yeah, I got my money for my 1 ton of supplies that they were required to buy, a lot of times they wouldn't make it to the morning. There was just no one to stop them, right? So it was a pretty crazy place. So downtown Victoria, especially around Wharf, is pretty well preserved. Most of the buildings are from the 1850s, 1860s. And I always say to people, they're like, oh, it's so great. Victoria was so smart to preserve their old buildings. And it's like, well, that's not exactly how it happened. What happened was, after World War I, of course, all the young men were gone. BC flirted with prohibition for about 6 or 7 years. And so it all of a sudden became way easier to just not bother smuggling your alcohol over on a boat, but just drink it in Vancouver. And when everyone came back from the war, it was Vancouver that had all the open land to build homes. So after World War I, Victoria just kind of went boom into a slump. And we have all the old buildings, not because we were so smart about preserving them, but because nobody really cared to build anything else. There was no reason to. Right. So Vancouver, on the other side, same industry, same push, but became much more of a leader in global shipping, became so much easier for train travel because you didn't have to get on a boat to get here, all those kinds of things. So New West, which is now a kind of a subdivision of Vancouver, Greater Vancouver area, it was really in contention to be the capital. That was the plan. New Westminster was going to be the capital, or Victoria, and there was a pretty ugly fight over who was going to be in charge. It got really ugly. They were going to have a final vote in Parliament and decide on who was going to be the capital. And someone got a hold of the representative from New Westminster's speech, and they stole a bunch of the cards and they mixed them all up. So this poor man got up to convince the assembly that New West should be the capital, and he couldn't even get out 3 sentences in a row. So that kind of sealed the deal. But it's I would say Vancouver definitely is more modern in terms of they've done a lot more building up, but there's still Gastown in Vancouver, which is part of the original city. There's still a lot of the old homes built by the steamship captains that are still out there. Some incredible mansions that are now, some of them are public buildings now. They use them as art galleries and things like that. But I also don't just report on those sort of old places. One of the big surprises when I started collecting stories was that it was in a mall, Park Royal Mall, which was actually built in the 70s, and looks modern for all intents and purposes. But I met one person in particular who told me some amazing stories because she'd worked there in 4 or 5 different stores. Right. And of course, it's on First Nations land, so big surprise. But it's almost like I could probably just autocomplete a lot of my stories that way. And we're not really sure where the energy came from, but it's on First Nations land, so yeah. But yeah, so it was pretty interesting. And then the modern hospitals as well. I always find there's ghost stories to be had at hospitals, 100%.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's true. I think that, that people have this fascination with hospitals, prisons, any institution of any kind.
Yeah, and I think with hospitals, you're going to find more of that sort of ghostly energy because it is a place of arrivals and departures, right? And it's a place of intense emotion. And that seems to make a bit more of a dent on the spiritual atmosphere than a lot of things. Same with prisons, same with mental institutions. They're just places of heightened, energy, a heightened emotion. And definitely if someone's sick or they die in their sleep and they don't know they're dead, chances are higher they're going to stick around and wander around for a while, right? So,
well, the other thing too that I found was the fact that it didn't have to necessarily be the place where people lived and then died.
Right.
It could have been a place where they lived and then for some reason this weird energy remained.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also like it attracts things, people. Or
100%. And sometimes people get really attached to where they're from.
Right.
They're attached to their home for whatever reason. That's their happiest time or unfinished business or they're miserable or whatever it is. I mean, people kind of can get stuck, I think. But you're right. It doesn't have to be, Granny died here, so her ghost must be here. Well, no, actually, Granny's actually, haunting the hotel where she got married. That was the greatest day of her life. And you see her go through whatever it is. I mean, if there's one thing I've learned, it's just when you think ghost stories are going to get predictable, yeah, they're not. It's always some kind of weird left turn.
And that's what I was going to ask you. If you were running into, some sort of common denominator where you're seeing some of the same things occur, but I don't think that would be true.
Well, you do see some certain, I would say some of the behaviors from the energy can be quite common. And I think that's because they are limited in how they can communicate. You hear some of the same stories about footsteps. People hear footsteps, doors opening and closing, smells sometimes, good and bad. Definitely a lot of auditory. I, for one, have never seen a ghost.
Right.
I've heard them, I felt them, but I've never seen one. So I don't have a problem with, people are always saying, oh, you must love going ghost hunting. No, I do not.
No,
I don't go looking
either.
for
Yeah,
it.
right.
I don't go looking for it. I have had enough proof in my long life that I do not require proof. And ghost hunting for me is kind of boring, honestly, because you do spend a lot of time talking to the air and hoping for a response. I don't need that. But I mean, for people who do, go for it, fill your boots. I mean, that's great. For me, I'm good. But I think as long as you know that what you're dealing with is most likely a person who no longer has a body and may just be super relieved that they can get you to pay attention to them in some way. I think what happens is we hear the banging, we hear the footsteps, and we get freaked out because, well, that shouldn't be happening. And what do they want? Right? Those are kind of the two biggest fear triggers, I think. I don't know what this is, and what do they want with me? Right. And really, I mean, if I'd been standing in the same back bedroom for 130 years, I'd be pretty chatty too. I think I'd be kind of excited to make contact with somebody who could actually hear what I was doing or would acknowledge it. And most of the stories I've heard, when people are in a situation where there's something in their house and they're scared to death, the ones who deal with it the best are the ones who talk to it out loud and say, hey, you're here, I'm here, that's cool, but you got to stop scaring me. Or please stop stealing my car keys, or whatever the behavior is. And 9 times out of 10, it stops. You're still aware that something's around, but it's almost as if the energy goes, oh, sorry, didn't realize, and then backs off.
Well, I think, there's that factor too, where there's fear. And you get so sick and tired and burned out on fear. You may be still fearful, but your nerves have had it. And you're going to get a little bit grumpy, and you're going to start acting out and talking back.
I had a lady, one of her stories that I think it's in it was in the Vancouver book, and she just had enough. And they were looking at doing a major reno on their house so that they could stay in the house. They loved the house. She knew there was a ghost, didn't bother her. But as the renos were happening, these workmen were quitting. They were running out in the middle of the day and not coming back. And she was getting more and more upset because she's like, this work's got to get done. I'm going to have this baby and we need the room. And she walked in the kitchen. she'd gone out shopping and she walked into the kitchen with her arms full of groceries, and every cupboard and every drawer had been pulled open, and she knew no one had been in the house.
Right.
And it's exactly what you said. She had it.
Yeah, that's
and
it.
she slammed the groceries on the counter and she goes, enough. You want us to leave? We'll leave. But I don't know who you're going to get in here.
Right.
So you might just want to back off, let us fix it the way we need it, and we'll all go back to the regular routine. And she turned around and walked out the door. And she came back about an hour later, and of course the ice cream's melting on the counter, whatever. But she said after that, it all went back to being very polite. None of the workmen were being scared. And then when the reno was over, she would still hear soft footsteps going up and downstairs and upstairs doors opening and closing. And I said to her, does it ever freak you out? Because her kids are, grown now and moved out, and she's still in the big house. And she goes, well, not really. She goes, now, I mean, if I didn't hear them, I guess I'd feel kind of lonely. Like, that's one of the benefits, is you always know someone's in the house. You're never really alone. So she learned to not only live with it, but honestly embrace it.
That's interesting, because when I look back and think about, for me initially it was my curiosity of old abandoned buildings,
which I love too.
And there's a lot of people who do that, and you see a lot of ghost hunting and investigation vlogs on YouTube, but you also see the guys and girls who go out and just to check out the building. They're really into the buildings. But, after like the fourth nail in my foot, I was like, is this a coincidence? I'm seriously, I mean, I remember as a kid, I stepped on a couple, and then as an adult, and I was like, I can't, I didn't really like being in them just because, it's not the most pleasant place to be, but interesting nonetheless. But the nails, and it's dangerous.
Did you ever have any ghostly experiences? Is that something you've run into?
Well, now that you bring it up, my house that I live in right now, it's a 1907 farmhouse, and I had a couple of things happen. And
like, what's going on now?
Well, I had the first thing that happened, it was like a spring day, and I'd been working outside, and I came in to take a shower and walked in. Everything in here is old. I mean,
right.
So what they did is they gutted the house and then replaced the old woodwork. So
right.
All the wood in here is dark, not black dark, but and that's the patina of age. And so it just looks super old in here, even though the walls are all drywalled and it's got foam.
The infrastructure isn't, but the finish is.
Yeah. So new electrical, new plumbing, new everything, but still looks old, and it's really odd. It's an odd feeling that you get when you're in here. But I'm in this dark bathroom, and I, as loud as probably I am when I'm excited, I heard somebody say hello.
Oh wow!
In a gravelly voice, and I literally almost went through the wall. And I opened the door. I thought somebody was in the house. Running through the house, and so I stopped to think about it, and I was like, "What was that?
Mm-hmm.
What was that?" I mean, that was as clear and as perfect.
So, how long have you lived in the house now?
This would be going on 6 years.
Okay, and when did that happen? How far into your
that would have been initially right the first year.
Okay, so whatever it was trying to say hi.
Yeah. So we were in here in October, and I'm assuming that was like April, May.
Okay, yeah.
And then the other thing was, this was weird too. I mean, it's all weird, but I was getting ready to leave the house one morning, and it was about probably 6:30 in the morning. I went to the laundry room to grab my coat, and I had my keys and my debit card in my hand, and I put them on the washing machine.
Right.
And I don't know if you've ever taken a card between your fingers and pinched it, and it flicks out.
Yep.
I heard that noise, and I heard my keys jingle just slightly, but I heard that noise, and my debit card's gone. And
oh my gosh.
And I'm looking, and I'm trying to justify, how your mind just
of course works, I know.
You're trying to make sense of it.
Yeah.
And I'm looking, and it was completely clean in there, and I was like, there's nowhere else it could be other than in the back. I mean, it couldn't have disappeared. I didn't think it disappeared. So I looked in the back of the dryer, which was about 2.5 feet away, and then down, and it was back there. And that was wild.
That's not unusual either. I have heard that. I've heard that where people have actually, something's gone missing where they knew where they left it, but now it's missing. And I had one friend. Well, I had one friend who kind of at the end of her rope, she just stood in the middle of the room. She's like, I don't care that you took it. I just need it back. And it had been in her bedroom. She had put it on the nightstand before she went to sleep the night before. Now it was gone. And she went downstairs from there, and there, smack dab middle of the kitchen table, was the watch that she'd been looking for. So, you know, like, where do you put that? And if you're someone who is very closed-minded, that's going to push you to the point where you're probably going to want to move out. But for me at this point now, it's like, oh, okay, well, cool. I remember the house we're in right now is not that old. It was built in 83. And I was here by myself, no pets, no wind, no windows open, nothing. And my partner was up north working, and I'm in bed reading, and I'm reading away, getting ready to go to sleep. It's probably 10:30, 11 at night. And then I hear the hangers in the closet clink together. Clink, 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 clink. And I knew exactly what it was, and I knew what was happening. And I remember looking over there and thinking, what do I do now? And I went, I think I'm just going to ignore it. And I just went back to reading, and I read for probably another 20 minutes, and I went to sleep. Because ultimately, what am I going to do? Run from the house screaming? Like, it didn't seem to be wanting to scare me, because it was doing it very gently, but it was definitely trying to say, hey, I'm here. But I wasn't, I mean, I get freaked out. Don't get me wrong. I've walked into some buildings and gone, nope, and turned around and walked right back out again. But this, I don't think whatever it is, I think whatever the energy is that has been here, because I've talked to the neighbors, and I know it goes to a couple of the other houses, is more of a dropping in kind of thing. Like, hey, what's going on here? Who's in here now kind of thing. And when I talked to the neighbor, I had a really good talk with him, and I said, you know, and of course you never know when you want to bring these things up, right? Because some people are like,
how do you,
you know, it gets kind of awkward
there?
So I said to him, hey, you know, you built this house, right? This house here. And he's like, yeah. And I said, have you ever had anything weird happen or kind of bizarre? And I mean, it helps now that I write ghost books and everyone knows it, so they're a lot more comfortable with me. But he goes, yeah, actually, he said, you know, when we were building the house, we had to stop for almost 6 months. And I said, why? And he goes, well, they found an Indian village, a First Nations village up here, and a cave with 6 bodies in it.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, because our property, the way it goes, I found, actually, because he told me this, I went and looked, and there's an archaeological dig map, and the dig does come out across onto our property as well. So I was like, oh, well, so we're just smack dab in the middle of their village. Like, no wonder they're coming to check it out. And we're right on the top of a hill. We overlook a harbor. Like, it would have been the perfect kind of place to have a village. It was highly defensible, and you could see people coming, and you know, but when he told me that, it was like everything clicked into place. We've had a bunch of weird things happen here, but that was the most, I want to say, personal, kind of right up close. The other thing, we were over at a different neighbor's house. She was 2 doors away, and we just got one of those Google Home things, and this Google Home's got a camera on it. And so we had it set up with movement alert and all the other rest, right? Because at the time we didn't have any pets, and so we had it on movement alert. So if there's a movement in the kitchen, it sends you a message and it plays you the clip. So we're sitting at her house, we're having some drinks, everything's fine. It's about 10, 11 at night, and all of a sudden my phone buzzes and my partner's phone buzzes, and we look, and there's a video clip, and the video clip is of something dark coming from the dining room door across the kitchen and then out of the camera. And we're like, what was that? And I don't know. And we decided we're just going to ignore it. Well, then 20 minutes later, it goes off again. And this time it's a bright light that sort of, it's almost as if someone turns a light bulb on in the center of the visual camera, like in the center of the room, and cranks it to full blast.
Right.
And then it disappears. And I look, and I'm like, I think we're just going to turn those settings off. And that is exactly what we did. We just shut them down. We're like, we don't want to know. We don't want to know. And that's how we dealt with that.
Don't tell. No, I'm that way. I mean, I understand that.
I don't need to know. You do you, buddy. Just don't freak me out.
Maybe if they get bored enough, they'll just stop.
Right? Well, honestly, we haven't had anything for a long time, like a long, long time. So I think maybe they just kind of went their way.
Well, after the debit card thing, I kind of crystallized the fact that we're not going to do this. I just, I'm
right.
And did a lot of talking out loud, and
that helps.
I'm not doing it. Just it's not going to happen.
No.
So
no. Good for you. You handled it perfectly.
I can't deal with that.
Me neither.
On top of, can you imagine coming home? After you're just stressed out after a day, and you just walk in and shit's going crazy in the house.
No, or the TV won't stay on the right channel.
Right, but according to some people, I mean, it's just there are people out there who live it, and that's their life.
That's their life.
Why is that though?
I don't know. I remember when I was a kid, because like I said, the family I grew up in was very, very religious, and also I think like spiritually kind of dead, because they never picked up on anything. And I had a good friend explain it to me when I was sort of 17, 18. It was really helpful. And she said, some people have to wear glasses. Some people have to wear hearing aids. Other people have, perfect 20/20 vision. And she said, in the same way, that kind of instinct that we all have as human beings, it's going to be stronger in some people than others. And so her theory was, when we pick up on something, when we pick up on that kind of energy that we can't define, but we know something's happening in the house or something's in the house. Because, I'm sure you've walked into a room before, and though you can't see the other person in there, someone else is in that room. Right. And it's that same thing. We have that ability. And I think most of us have that ability, but we're taught, even as children, to kind of, suppress it. No, don't judge a book by its cover. And no, go and give your uncle a hug. And everything in your tiny little brain's going, no, uncle bad, or whatever it is, but we're kind of taught to dismiss that. And I think that is a very real thing that people do. And if we just listen to those instincts, there'd be a whole lot less fear, and you might surprise yourself by being able to actually kind of make some sort of understanding with whatever that energy is.
Yeah, I don't know. It requires a bigger person than me, I guess.
You know what? I'm not saying I want to do that in my own home. Please don't misunderstand.
Yeah.
And it's easy for me to say because mine's over.
This was quite a while ago, maybe 3 years ago. I had a podcast planned, and what I did was I went on eBay and bought a bunch of quote unquote haunted objects. They were dolls.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And I ended up giving them away, but so the plan was, I'd made contact with 3 people, bought the dolls, and they were all into it. They were gonna be on the show and whatever, and it just fell through. And it was the oddest thing. And so for some reason, I never pursued that again. It's a great topic for a podcast.
Yeah.
But, so I had these 3 boxes that I got, postal service priority mail boxes. They're all sitting out on my front porch. Like for 6 months, I wouldn't bring them in the house.
No.
Because, and even though I was a bit skeptical, like really skeptical, because most of these people had like 60 items that I've seen them sell in the last, year. And, they were pretty obviously manipulated these dolls to look nasty. But no, I didn't want them in my house. I mean, I didn't even, my friend Timothy Earl, who's an exorcist, told me that there's different kinds of energy that basically is almost created from nothing, and,
right?
I just the whole attitude, the whole the idea of it just seemed disturbing. So I thought, don't mess with the good thing.
Exactly. It's the same thing. People who start messing around and don't understand about Ouija boards.
Right.
I don't think Ouija boards are evil. I am not comfortable using them. I think when you're using a Ouija board, you're essentially throwing open the window or throwing open the front door and saying, hey, anybody want to come in?
Right.
Come on in. And
Right.
then having no way of getting rid of them and no way of controlling who comes in. And for me, it was like, I don't think so. I mean, I'm skeptical, but I believe enough to believe that. You know what I mean? So I totally understand what you're saying about the haunted dolls. It's like, do I really want to open this door? You know, whether or not it's authentic, even if just one of them has something going on,
Right.
is that a door I want to open? And for me, yeah, it would be the same. It'd be like, no, I'm good.
So in the area up there, Vancouver, let's just talk about Vancouver for a minute.
Sure.
Is there any hot spot up there that is just notorious? That everybody
I would say Gastown, downtown. There's quite a few haunted buildings down there, and that really is kind of the original downtown of Vancouver. So, you know, from the 1800s, it was a pretty notorious place too, in terms of what was going on down there, and brothels and all those lovely things. So pretty rich history. I have a friend named Lydia who actually helped me with the Vancouver book. She runs the Vancouver Ghost Walks, and they are 100% focused in Gastown. Cobblestone streets, old buildings, the whole deal. Like it's all there. Victoria has quite a bit of that as well, but ours is more all of downtown rather than just one section. Yeah, I would say for Vancouver, definitely Gastown, right down by the water. 100%.
How about Victoria?
Victoria, we have two super haunted places. One is Bastion Square, where the old prison was, where they used to do the old hangings, and they built the Supreme Court of British Columbia. On the site of the hangings where they used to bury the criminals. Nice. If you want to get a haunted building, throw a bunch of dead criminals into the floorboards. That's a great plan.
They did that in Canada. I didn't realize that.
Oh, yes. There were at least 11 men who ended up buried there because no one would claim their bodies. So, yeah. And then the other place would be Market Square. And Market Square is interesting because half of it was in what used to be Chinatown and half of it was European. And there was a big dividing line down the middle called the Johnson Ravine. And it had a creek that ran through. Well, that creek is still there. They've carved it all over. They've paved all over it. But there's a tunnel in underground that the creek runs through and empties into the ocean. But what they did was they left all the old buildings from the 1800s and they converted them into office space and retail space. So it's a whole, and every single one of those buildings has a ghost story attached to it. Even the metaphysical shop in there, it's called Avondale or Avon something. And I went in there and I said to the owner, oh, you guys moved. You used to be a couple of doors down, because they're in the basement of the old buildings, right? It kind of all looks onto a courtyard. And she goes, yeah, we kind of had to move. She goes, there was just something in there that wouldn't leave us alone. And I said, oh, and has moving helped? She's like, no, the stupid thing followed us. But she kind of opened up about how they'd come into the store in the morning and they would unlock the door and turn off the alarm and look, and like a whole shelf of books would be on the floor, or all the crystals would be moved to another table, or, you know, like kind of pretty big stuff was happening. And that's why they moved shops. They thought maybe if they moved shops, whatever it was would leave them alone, but no, there's no way.
Wow. Yeah.
So that's Market Square, and it's,
right.
Yeah, I would say that's very haunted as well.
So is there a part of Vancouver or Victoria that, you know, a lot of towns have like underground Seattle, underground Portland, even up on the High Line in Montana, they have Havre, Montana has an underground.
Does it really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so they have an underground tour. I didn't know if they had anything like that, because obviously they built over top of stuff.
They did. Apparently there weren't a whole lot of tunnels. Because everything was legal. We had opium dens and we had 4 opium factories here in Victoria, but it was perfectly legal. There was no reason to hide it. And then I was telling about Prohibition, where tunnels might have come in handy, but they didn't need them because all the booze went to Vancouver. So there was really no point there. What they did do is they used the subterranean caves and stuff. And they did have some tunnels that would connect buildings, but they mostly used them for storage. There's a building on Government Street, which is kind of our main tourist street. which now houses a Bath and Body Works kind of place. But that was Victoria's original funeral home. And down in the basement, they basically cut out niches for out of the rock to put the bodies in, because it would naturally keep them cool.
Right.
And for a while, that place was a t-shirt store. And I went in there one time and I'm like, do you guys use downstairs? And she's like, she looked at me and she looked sick. And she goes, yes. And I said, you don't like it down there? She's like, no. She said every time they went down there, something would fall off a shelf, kind of, oh, what a coincidence. She hated it and felt it really strongly down there. So yeah, it's definitely left its mark 100%. Now, sadly, what they do is if you own one of those buildings and you want to do a renovation, you have to basically sign a piece of paper with the city saying that if you find a tunnel, you are responsible for blocking it up. So that's what they're doing with them. And at first people are like, oh, why would they do that? And I said, well, not to be a party pooper, but from an insurance point of view,
right?
Say you're walking through those tunnels and you fall down or a rock hits you in the head. Who's responsible for that now?
Right.
The city, because it's on city property, not private property.
And people find out about tunnels and they get there. I mean,
they do, and that's exactly why they're blocking them all off.
Yeah, and that's not a new thing. I mean, you go to London, England, they got tunnels that are blocked off, tunnels of tunnels of tunnels of tunnels.
100%.
And and even in cities that were built in the 1920s have some sort of weird.
Even in Saskatchewan, Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan has an underground tunnel tour.
For some reason, I got to go. That's a town I got to go to. My brother's been there. I've never been there. It's a little bit out of the way. There's really not a direct, you got to take a bunch of different roads to get there.
You really do. And apparently it was a big popular place for Al Capone. That was one of the places he would run to and when the law was on his tail. And that was part of the reason why the underground tunnels are there. Right. They kind of use it as a central shipping hub, from what I understand. So yeah, I've never done that tour. I did do the underground Seattle tour and I thought it was amazing. Yeah. But I've never done the one in Moose Jaw because I don't have a whole lot of occasion to go to Moose Jaw.
Right. So there was, up in that area, like Regina, they have some big concerts and I looked to try to go to those, good grief. I mean, what a trek. As the crow flies, it's not that far from like eastern Montana, but it's you got to crawl all kind of dirt roads, gravel roads, paved roads.
I know.
If you want a more direct route, it's tough to get there.
Yeah, I totally get it.
Unless you flew. So you have another book coming up, and did you start writing the one with
Calgary?
Calgary, have you started that book?
Yeah, what I've done is I've gotten all the stories for it in terms of what I'm going to write about.
Right.
I have made some wonderful contacts there with different paranormal groups. And luckily I was raised in Calgary. So when they're talking to me about different places, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right by Inglewood, or, I've got a kind of at least an understanding of where we're talking about. So I haven't started physically writing it yet. I'm still in that sort of gathering phase, but I've got a number of interviews to do. And I learned from the first book, like the way you want to do it is you interview someone and then you say, if you think of anyone else you think I should talk to, let me know. And almost always they're like, oh yeah, my friend Dave had this really crazy experience there, and that's usually how that kind of flows. And then sometimes Dave will talk to you and sometimes Dave won't, there's no guarantees, but you can at least find a way to make those personal contacts. I love talking to security guards or night janitors. Right. Yeah. Those are the people who have those real hardcore firsthand experiences in those buildings.
Yeah, that's a book in itself, the janitors of the whatever.
Oh my gosh, can you imagine ghost stories of the janitors? I would buy that book in a heartbeat. Cool, yeah.
That's a good one. Hang on to that idea. I like that.
Yeah.
Calgary, the Saddle Dome, just, I guess it would be almost due south. I can't think of the street that runs north and south, 89th or something like that. But by the Saddle Dome, Calgary, the cemetery south of the Saddle Dome.
Yeah. They put the C train under that.
Right.
Yeah.
And, so there's a hotel it was new quite a few years ago, just on the south end of the cemetery. And I'd stayed there several times, and we'd go to game and then walk across there and through the cemetery. And it's really a cool place.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's well kept, but it still looks very, very old.
Very, very cemetery. Yeah.
Right. So that's a cool place. And, you know,
you would love, if you ever get out to Victoria, you got to go to Ross Bay Cemetery.
Really?
It's our largest and one of our oldest.
Cool.
And you would be hard pressed to not find someone who grew up in Victoria who had a weird experience in there. Like, it is jumping.
Right.
Yeah.
I've been to Edinburgh, Scotland, Greyfriars Cemetery.
Oh, I want to go to that. That's on my bucket list.
And then there's another one, really not very far, maybe a half mile. That's equally impressive. But that's another place with tunnels and underground tours, and I've done a bunch of them.
Very cool.
But still, there's getting out on the Alberta prairie and checking out. If you drive from basically central Montana up to Calgary, I mean, there's so many abandoned buildings out on the.
Oh yeah. Just
really, really, really a place that such a huge native history, and you could see it when you're out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, things happen there because you can see these features of the prairie that you just know.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. It's a wild land. It's still a wild land. That's what makes being here in Victoria and Vancouver so interesting. Is it's a city, but it's not that far away from the wild land it was. Less than 200 years ago, kind of thing. So there's always sort of that in the back of your head whenever you're out and about. You're like, yeah, we think look how old our city is. No.
Have you ever, I'm not sure if it's in Alberta. I can't remember if it's in Alberta or if it's in British Columbia. Frank.
Oh, the Frank Slide.
Yeah.
That's in Alberta. Yeah. I have a number of times. I remember going there as a kid.
Right.
And being very freaked out by it.
Yeah. When I was a kid, that was, it wasn't as dramatic when I was an adult. It's still huge though.
It's massive. And I remember as a kid being there and really feeling the magnitude of it. And and if someone had said to me, "Oh, it's haunted," I'd be like, "Yo," like I would have had no problem, no problem believing that whatsoever. There's
you probably know a lot about it more than I do. Just talk about just a minute. Just tell people what we're talking about.
Yeah. So it's massively famous on a really small local scale. Basically it was the early 1900s, I believe, 1904, something like that. The town of Frank, it was another one on the railroad line, and Turtle Mountain was the mountain that went. And in the middle of the night, I think it was 2 or 3 in the morning, half of Turtle Mountain came down and buried not all of Frank, but a large chunk of Frank, the town of Frank, buried it,
ground it to bits.
Well, boulders the size of cars, which are still there.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
And the rumors were, it took the bank, which had been full of money, and it wiped out the school and the theater. It wiped out most of downtown, and a lot of the poorer side of town. That's where a lot of the poorer people lived, in those smaller homes. So basically, people heard a rumbling and thought the world was coming to an end. And then if they managed to get out of their houses, they were looking at the rest of their town under rock. It was just gone. I think in the end, I'm not even sure if they even could move it for the railroad. I think they diverted the railroad around it.
It's just this mountain of limestone chunks.
And,
it's
they built an interpretive center, and they have some recordings of firsthand accounts of people who were there, who were children when it happened. Like, whew, it's intense. And the funny part is, you could drive right by it, not even know it's there. Like, and, that was the crazy part.
One of the things that struck me too was the fact that it looks like all new limestone. I mean, there's nothing growing. I mean, there's nothing. I mean, it looked like it just happened today.
Yeah.
And when you pull up there, it looks like a disaster that just happened.
It does. And the interpretive center is built kind of up and over it, which is actually kind of cool. But yeah, I remember seeing that as a kid. And then we went back there in junior high for school trip. And both times feeling that magnitude of what had happened there. And just, yeah. And of course, I think there is a ghost story about how people could still hear the church bell going, certain nights. Or
I had heard that it killed everybody in town except one infant they found.
Oh, okay.
Boulders, but no, it was pretty dramatic. And in my mind, I think they did smelting for mining there. And
yeah, there was a mine there too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And that's why the railroad went through there, because it would pick up whatever they had been mining. So yeah, no, it was a pretty serious little town until that happened.
Then not far from there's a buffalo jump.
Head smashed in buffalo jump.
Yeah, that's cool too.
Yeah, very cool.
So the funny thing about that, my kids growing up here, we don't have a lot of wind here.
Right.
We do now, but it's temporary. Not like out there, like on the east slope of the Rockies, the Canadian and the Montana Rockies. But I took my kids to that buffalo jump, and the wind was blowing like 45 miles per hour.
Yeah,
and scared them to death. Literally, they could not handle it. I mean, they were like just so freaked out. It was so. To me, that's like every day as a kid, growing up.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that, because I took my son from here and I took him out to Alberta to visit, and he was completely freaked out because it was so open and flat.
Right.
He's like, where are the trees? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
It was awesome.
There was that too, because they never, I always told him, I said, I grew up on the prairie. I can see a bird like 10 miles away. I said, you guys probably aren't used to seeing more than a mile at a time.
Exactly.
In front of you, and that was too, they're out in the middle of this whatever. I mean, it freaked them out. I mean, it was super windy. The other cool thing we saw, here you are at this buffalo jump, and where all this amazing things happen. And then we went 1 mile from there, and here's this native buffalo jump. And then 1 mile from there, there was a farmers out there picking up hay bales with a helicopter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, that's crazy, man. It's just
that only in Alberta.
Yeah. Both sides of the coin right there. But,
yeah.
So when do you expect the book to be done? And that's the one I'd like to really read.
Yeah, that book should be supposed to be done by the end of October. So realistically, I'm thinking end of December. And then it will go through the whole brutal cut, slash, and burn process that the publisher puts it through, do rewrites, all those kinds of things. And then it's slated to come out October 2023.
Cool. So let everybody know, we got about just a couple of minutes. Let everybody know about your website. I like your website. And what's the lighthouse? Is that a real?
That is from the book. Yeah. From the Victoria book. That's the Fizzguard Lighthouse. And the Fizzguard Lighthouse is, and there's a fort as well. That's part of that whole complex. It's a national park. Yeah, my website, ghoststoryguy.com. And you can find anything to do with me there, books, podcasts, whatever you're looking for. Ghoststoryguy.com. And of course the books are available everywhere, honestly. Indigo, Chapters, Amazon, wherever you want to find them, they're there. That's the other thing I have to do this year. I have to record Vancouver's Most Haunted as an audiobook.
Are you gonna read it?
I am. Yeah, I got to do it.
I don't know how anybody could do that. I mean, it's hard for me just to sit and read a book.
Yeah. Well, if you're going to do it and your publisher is expecting you to do it, that kind of helps.
There's got to be a way, though. I mean, there's got to be somebody who's going to take you aside and say, okay, here's how we do it, Well,
it's funny you say that, because that's what's held me back. Is I looked at all the Audible requirements and I'm like, ooh, that's a lot. And so what's been holding me back primarily is fear. Right. So I just don't want to screw it up or put all that work into it and find out, no, you did it wrong. That's not going to work.
Fear is a huge motivator in some way. I don't know.
Yes,
what it would be, but
yeah.
Oh, and you have a podcast too, right?
Yeah, Ghosts and Bears.
How often?
Every other week. we do one every other week. We got these great guys who are videographers, and they come and he's done, Alex and Chris have done some amazing stuff. If you go to the Ghosts and Bears YouTube channel, you can actually see some of the videos they've done of some of the episodes. Agnes Bing and Helmkin House, and oh no, they didn't do Helmkin House. I did that one. It's terrible. But some of the other ones they've done have been just amazing. So we're really lucky to have them on our side and doing that. We actually had a meeting last night. I plotted out all the episodes until the end of August, and because I have to give them lots of lead time, right? They need to go out and shoot stuff and edit. And so I can't just fly by the seat of my pants like I've been doing. I actually have to go out and do it. So that's been really good. And they're going to be doing even more videos coming up. So it should be really, I'm excited for it.
So talk about, just really quick, about your story link that you have. Is that a real thing? We can submit stories?
100%.
Wow.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So people can just tell their story and send it to me, and people do. It's amazing. I love getting them. I respond to every single one of them. And you never know if it happens to line up with me writing a book. I always tell people that I have someone in Alberta right now has been posting it on social media for me on all sorts of history sites in Calgary. And so they've, put it out there that, hey, if you've got your own ghost story, he wants to hear it. So here's the link. So that's been really good.
Awesome. So Ian Gibbs has been in the studio tonight. His website is ghoststoryguide.com, and check you out on Facebook as well, correct?
Oh yeah, I'm everywhere. Instagram, Ghost Story Guy, Facebook, Ghost Story Guy. Yeah, I'm like a social media whore. I don't want to be, but
I must be one too as well. So.
Yeah.
Gibbs, thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Take care.
And let's think about the people and the families of Ukraine tonight, and Russia as well. And God bless everyone, and good night.